will definitely not shut up and dribble.
The champ is here. I must be the greatest. The champ is here.
I'm going to continue to stand with the people.
The champ is here.
I will not lose.
I'm a bad man. I took up the world.
Yes, welcome. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you were here with we. My name is EJ, and I got my man.
MH.
Yes, he is the DB of the show, and we are Black in Sports, giving a voice to the culture that won't shut up and dribble. Here interviewing the best professionals in the game and in the boardroom. Here covering it all, laughing at it all, while providing a platform to be heard. All right, so you know it's been a while, but this is how we do it. We love to welcome our guest. He is a award-winning sports reporter, okay? Recent master's grad. We're going to definitely get into that, from Northwestern. He's a multiple Hall of Famer. So we want to explain that too. We want to jump into that. And then you all may know him from, his little day job, that he has on Sundays. Yes, he is the commentator on a little show you may have heard of, Fox Sports Sunday. Please clap it up for Curt Menefee. I hope that intro was okay, man.
It was. I may get you to, I may hire you to be my hype man whenever I go anywhere. Make me sound better than I am.
Not at all. Well, hey, how we start the show is we start the show with a shoot your shot moment. It's just really kind of that quick story just to get you going. A time where you bet on it all, or you bet on yourself. It could have been good or bad. It could have been a lesson you learned from shooting your shot and maybe having to catch that rebound. But give us a shoot your shot moment.
Probably the one that made the biggest difference as far as where I am now is I was doing local sports, and I came up, we can talk about it as we go on, but, doing sports on the 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock news, depending on where you are at night, and doing that report. And I got to New York City, which is the biggest market in the country, the number one market, the place that, most people who are doing this would like to end up their careers in local sports. And I did that, and I went there in 95. But in 2004, I said, this is no longer satisfying me. I enjoyed the sports aspect of it. I enjoyed the work part of it, but it wasn't fulfilling. Maybe that's probably a better way to put it. So I gave up the gig. It was the number one station, WNYW in New York, with Fox 5, the number one station in the number one market. And I just decided, you know what, I'm done. And I walked away. The goal was, though, I thought I wanted to do more play-by-play. And in order to get better and do what I, get to the next level, if you will, I needed to be able to do basketball and baseball and other sports that you have to do at night, and you can't then do the 10 or 11 o'clock news afterwards. So I gave all that up, walked away, not knowing where I was going, what was going to be the future, how I was going to pay the rent, the mortgage, and just kind of gambled. And, eventually I was doing games at Fox, so I did have that as a background, but, NFL games in the lower tier, I think like the fifth or sixth crew out of six crews, and decided I'm just going to shoot for it, shoot my shot. And I wound up doing that. It lasted for about a year and a half. And then Fox came to me when James Brown left and went to CBS and put me in the studio, and, the rest is history. So, I mean, I think it was probably one, you wonder sometimes, had you stayed there as a local guy and not tried to pursue the other stuff, where your life might have ended up. But I think there's so many places we all look back over time. You're like, man, if I hadn't gone this way, or because I went that way, some things happen that you could never draw up.
Absolutely.
Love it. Bet on yourself. So
yeah.
Curt, where did your love for sports start?
Probably when I was a kid. I mean, I grew up in Atlanta, single mom, and my mom wasn't a huge sports fan, but she would pay attention enough, to know. But my grandmother was a big Atlanta Braves fan. As a matter of fact, the first sporting event I ever went to was my grandma taking me to see the Braves and the Pirates play in 1979. So that was probably it. My uncle was around. He was a big football fan, a big sports fan, and I was always a bigger kid. So I played sports, and, show my age again, but, back then we just played sports in the neighborhood, man. And, part of the year you played football, and part of the year you played baseball, and part of the year you played basketball. And I was pretty much one of the two best athletes probably in the neighborhood. There's always those two guys, they go head to head. It doesn't matter what the sport is. So I was that. And so I was always really, because I was good at sports, I liked sports. And, my uncle really pushed me towards football, being a bigger kid in particular. But baseball was really my first love. And that came from my grandmother. And she was a big Braves fan, and would take me to games, and, we watch all the games on TV and all that stuff. So I think that just homegrown is where that love came from.
That's awesome.
So as the first captain, I'm sure in the neighborhood selecting the team on the baseball diamond. Was pitcher the position?
No,
or
first base. I would say, I could hit the hell out of the ball. I mean, it was one of the things I could, I could hit and I could field a little bit.
Mhm.
I couldn't move great, so that was the issue. So I got stuck at first base, and that was it. Because basically, it was either you're going to be a first baseman or a catcher, and I didn't want to be a catcher. I didn't want to squat down and the knees and get beat up and all that kind of stuff. So I wanted to be a first baseman, and they loved that because they needed my bat. So that was it. I was first baseman for baseball in grade school and high school. I was a tight end and linebacker for football. Again, positions that require a little bit of athleticism, but not a lot of speed. So that was kind of me. So I was a big man, for my size in basketball, and I would just kind of post up down the lane, get rebounds, and pass the ball out. That was it.
And your 5 fouls, those count, baby.
They do. They do.
Now you mentioned your knees, being a catcher, but you also said when people want to know if you play football that you got the scars on your knees to prove it.
yeah, absolutely. So and again, not going back on the age thing, I'm 57, so I'm not that old, but I've got the old school knee surgery. You know what I mean? Like the big scar all the way around one side and a scar around the other side. And people look at it and they're like, man, what happened to you? Yeah, football. But it was in a way that was a blessing. And I go back to talking about not knowing how life is going to work out. That happened to me when I was 15 years old in high school. And at that point, I thought I was going to be an NFL player and how good I was because I was better than most kids my age. And now I know I don't have the size and I never would have been, no matter how athletic and whatever I was. But I wasn't athletic enough. Now you're old enough to know that was zero shot of happening. But when you're 15, you think you have a shot. And I blew out my knee in a game and tore all the ligaments in it, broke the kneecap, everything. And so it was a year and a half before I was able, again, rehab was a little bit different then. It was a year and a half before I was able to walk without any assistance. I started out on a walker, then I was on crutches, and I was on a cane. I had to be homeschooled for the rest of that school year. It was in November. So the rest of that school year all the way till June. And so because I went to a high school that, there was no ADA then. So we had stairs. And half of my classes were on the second and third floor. I had a walker. I couldn't get up and down the stairs.
Right.
So they, in the public school system, would send an instructor to my home 3 days a week, and had to keep up with classes and that kind of thing. But my point is that made that dream of being a professional football player disappear at the age of 15. And you go, well, that's a hard thing to lose when you're that age. But it forced me to think, okay, what do I want to do? And I said, well, I want to be involved in sports somehow, and I want to stay around the game. And look, there's a million things that you don't know when you're that age. And so I was like, well, maybe I can be a photographer, because that's one of the few things I knew that sports guys could do. Okay. There weren't a whole lot of brothers on TV in a studio or calling play-by-play. And so at that point, I don't know, that even registered in my head. So I thought maybe I wanted to be a sports photographer so I could stay around the game. But that got me on the path of thinking about doing something else besides being an athlete, and different ways of staying around sports and maybe turning that into a career. So again, that's one of those things that you wouldn't really wish on yourself, but it's one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Absolutely. And then during that time, you had a lot of downtime. Is this where you picked up the love for the guitar, or did the guitar love come a little later in life?
That kind of came. The guitar came later in life.
Okay.
What started is I started out playing instruments when I was young. My uncle that I talked about, that I'm named after, my Uncle Curtis. He was a jazz trombonist. He played with a lot of recording session musicians, toured the country, played with a lot of jazz bands and blues, a lot of blues as well. And so when I was, off the top of my head, 7 or 8, he gave me one of his trombones to start playing. My arms weren't long enough to reach all the notes, so I had to kind of maneuver and kind of figure it out. But with that, I started playing in the school band. I played in the school band for like 4th, 5th grade or whatever. And then the orchestra teacher at school recruited me to play stand-up bass. And so I started playing stand-up bass in the 6th grade. So I was playing the trombone in the band and stand-up bass. And then before that 6th grade year was even done, she says, you're good enough to be in the high school band. So I was like the child prodigy, So I wound up playing in the high school band when I was in the end of my 6th grade year, but 7th and 8th grade, high school orchestra, excuse me. And then when I actually got to high school, I decided being in the orchestra wasn't cool enough. So I gave that up. Now I'm looking back. I'm like, well, being a trombone player wasn't that much cooler either. So, but it sounded better being in the band than being in the orchestra, So I gave that up, and I wish I hadn't. And so as I got older, I started playing the bass guitar again. And that's what I played as an adult, just goofing around and playing around and that kind of thing. And then for my 50th birthday, my wife bought me a Gibson electric guitar, because I'd play with an acoustic guitar periodically. And so she did that. And so then I started really getting interested in playing the guitar as well. But still, bass is my first love. So I don't play the trombone around the house anymore, but I can play the bass.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
So getting past some of that, the injuries, and then finding ways in sports that you mentioned, you reached out to Fred Hickman of CNN, and that helped me make a college choice. So I guess what gave you the mindset to do that, and how did that conversation work?
Having the stones of a 17-year-old kid. And that was really it. So CNN, Fred Hickman, back then, again, CNN did sports. And they had a show called CNN Sports Tonight that would air at 11 o'clock each night, half hour. And it's basically what SportsCenter is. It was a half hour then, but it was bigger than ESPN, bigger than SportsCenter. I mean, it was the place that everybody went to watch sports. And Fred Hickman was one of the anchors there. And when I started getting recruited, I went to Coe College in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a little Division III school, in which we can get into. Going from Atlanta, Georgia to Cedar Rapids, Iowa is a whole different thing. But Fred was on CNN, black guy, and I heard he had gone to Coe College. This is after I started getting recruited. Coe still has none. Journalism program, no television station, and all the things that you think you would want to do if you wanted to get in it. But when I heard he went there, I just said, let me pick up the phone, and I called CNN. They patched me through to his desk. I left him a message saying, hey, I'm a kid. I'm going to Turner High School. I'm thinking about going to Coe College. Just wanted to get your insight. And he called me back, and he wound up telling me a lot about Coe, a lot about Cedar Rapids, and we established a relationship. He helped me get an internship at CNN the summer after my freshman year in college. And that's how I got started in television, 100% because of him.
That's awesome.
That's unbelievable. So, I mean, you basically were doing the virtual schooling before.
Yeah, exactly. I was DMing the old school way. I picking up the phone and leaving it
and all that. Yeah.
Pioneer, baby. Trailblazer.
Somebody got to blaze the trail, right?
Love it. So talk to us about Coe. I mean, so that's one of the Hall of Fames that you're in. So lead into that, but just tell us about, because that's the first thing I saw. I was like, okay, kid from Atlanta.
Yeah.
and you see Iowa. So what was that kind of breakout for you to kind of get adjusted, right?
Yeah. Oh, that was the big adjustment. And it's so funny, just to backtrack a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to Turner High School, and I think we had about 2,000 students there. So I had 2,000 students in my high school, and I had 1,200 in my college. So that was the first adjustment, was going to a college that was smaller.
Small.
My high school, I would say it was all black, but we had one white girl that was there. So it was 1,999.
That's a whole other kind.
Kids, yeah, and one young white lady. And then when I went to college, it was just the opposite. Out of the 1,200 students, there were 40 of us that were black. 44, I think, was probably about the peak number when I was there. Now it's much more diverse now. The school's a little bit larger, but it's much more diverse. But we had a couple of international students as well, but that was it. So everything was flipped upside down. It was smaller. I was certainly in the minority, which was strange, because when you're growing up as a young kid in Atlanta, when you're growing up as a young kid, probably anywhere, you think everywhere is like the world that you live in, that the neighborhoods look like that and those kind of things. Yeah, you see things on TV, and maybe you go, we went to visit our relatives in Washington, D.C. Well, Washington, D.C. was the same as Atlanta. They're both chocolate cities, So this is what it's like everywhere. And that was one of the things that Fred explained to me. He goes, there are more Native Americans in Iowa than there are black people. So be prepared when you go there that it's going to be a lot different than where you grew up. So I had that in my head, but it's different hearing it than seeing it. And so I think that was a bit of an adjustment. But I think one thing is, I've always been comfortable in who I am.
Right.
And those kind of things don't bother me. So I go, okay, this is how I need to adapt. And I just keep being me and doing my thing, and it'll all work out. And so that was my approach. But it was eye-opening, certainly, to step off. I went on the Greyhound bus to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, from Atlanta. So, I mean, I grew up, I told you, single mother. We had no money. Had I not gone on the scholarship, I would not have been able to go to college. So we packed up my stuff, hopped on a Greyhound bus. It took me about 36 hours. I got off the bus. The recruiter picked me up at the bus station and took me to campus. And that was the first time I saw the campus, was when I arrived there for freshman orientation.
When's the first time you saw that snow? What was that? What was that reaction?
This is, yeah. I always remember my freshman year, you have those Januaries in the Midwest. I mean, it is below zero most of the time, at zero. And I remember one day it was 21 degrees and everybody was walking around in shorts and t-shirts. And what the hell's wrong with these people? 21 degrees felt warm after 2 weeks of zero. So that was kind of the welcome to the Midwest moment. It is funny though, like, I grew up in Atlanta and we get ice storms and stuff every winter, every now and then, but nothing major. My senior year, after I decided to go to Co, we had the biggest snowstorm that the city had ever had. It snowed 8 inches one morning, like overnight into the morning. So school gets canceled, all this kind of stuff. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, all the snow had melted, and now it was flash flooding in the area because there was just nothing but water everywhere. But that was like, is this a sign? Is this trying to prepare me for what I was going to be like? What snow is like? Obviously, half a day didn't get you going. But one of the great things about going to school at a place like Co or somewhere in the Midwest is they build it around it. I mean, there were underground tunnels, not for every building, for a lot of the buildings. So you didn't have to go outside and be exposed. But, I just can't stand cold weather. I live in California now, and it's one of those that if it gets below 60, I'm freaking out. My wife and I turn the heat on when it's like 63 degrees outside, So it's not environmentally friendly, but, I just can't stand the cold, man. And so that took a little bit of adjusting too. And so I went to Co College for 4 years. I then worked in Des Moines, Iowa for 1 year. And then in Madison, Wisconsin, which I was a weekend sports anchor there. And that was the first anchor job I had. So, and that was 2 more years. And after 7 years, that was another one. I go, okay, I'm out of the Midwest. I'm done. I'm not staying here anymore. And so I had made up my mind that last winter that I was there was going to be my last winter that I was there.
Let's go.
Yeah. And I did, trust me. There's only so much plugging in the car battery you can do in the middle of the night.
Scraping the ice off the.
It's nuts, man. It is. Yeah. And the last winter I was there, we had a 2-week stretch where it didn't hit zero. So it was like not even for a high for the day. And I'm just like, I'm done with this. I am done.
Thank you.
Yeah. I served my sentence. Let me out,
That far. So kind of jumping into the career, man, we're going to like jump back and forth, but I want to start with, I think, in my opinion, what I mean? Because I think it's the best Sunday sports show. Me and Mason had this kind of comment, go back and forth. Yeah. But it's like it was full circle for you, man. Like you started, like part of your shoot your shot was you started at Fox, and then like you said, and I think it was 2007, 6 that you came.
When I got put in the studio,
you got put back in the studio for the show. Yeah,
2006, which is a little complicated because JB left and went over to CBS.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So in 2006, Fox decided to put me and Joe Buck as co-hosts on the show, but we did the show on the road. Kind of like game day or Saturday does out at Fox. So we'd be on the road in front of the crowd before the big game on Fox, but that was always the game that Joe did. So we kind of shared the duties that year. And then 2007 moved it back to the studio and I took over full time and Joe stayed on the road. So yeah, that's why people go, is it 6 or 7? It's a little bit of both.
Gotcha.
But yeah, they got put back in the studio after all that time. And it is funny because I quit the studio because I wanted to do something else, and I wanted to go back to the studio.
I don't go back.
Yeah, but it's a whole different role, man, and this is heaven. I mean, this is doing the local sports. I loved it. I really did. But after a while, I needed a new challenge, and I think that was it as much as anything else. You're doing highlights of your local sports teams, and it's 3 minutes at night at the end of this newscast, and the way local news goes. Oh, if there's a fire or something and it runs long, well, you don't have 3 minutes. Now you got a minute and a half because you're the end of the show and that's all we've got left. And so you get tired of being the stepchild, I think is part of it. And I was not treated wrong or anything it's just the nature of the beast. I mean, that's just what it is. And so I think that after a while, I just didn't feel challenged by it anymore. And so I wanted to do something different. And I had started to do play-by-play and I was doing play-by-play for the NFL for Fox. Which I started doing that in 97. And I wanted to try other sports and expand my horizons and say, okay, maybe this would be it. And I can remember, I don't know if you know Dave Sims, he's the play-by-play voice of the Seattle Mariners now. but he was a local guy at the CBS station in New York, and he was doing some play-by-play for CBS Sports from a college basketball standpoint, a little NFL. And I remember talking to him one day, and he was doing the same thing. He was going to leave and stop doing the local news thing. And he goes, man, I can tell you what, and I had just started doing play-by-play. He goes, the more you do this, the more you're going to realize that's where it is, that it gets your blood going. There's nothing like it. And he was 100% right. That being in a stadium, in my case, I did a couple WNBA seasons, but in an arena or a stadium in front of a live crowd, and it's called play-by-play because literally you have no idea what's going to happen from one play to the next. That excitement, that thrill, totally changed my perspective on the local news, and I think that had something to do with feeling the need to be challenged again. Because then I would do the Fox games on the weekends, the NFL season. So you do a game on Sunday, and then you go back at Monday, and you're sitting around and you're doing like 3 minutes of highlights, and there's no live crowd, and the juice is just not there anymore. And so you kind of need that fix again. And I think that I don't want to say I was addicted to it, but I needed that adrenaline rush that I didn't get anymore, at least from doing local sports.
Speaking of local sports, and we'll obviously jump back, but you were part of two major markets during like the heydays. So obviously in the Dallas area during the Cowboys Super Bowl run, and then in New York, I'm a Cowboys. I respect the Cowboys, and then the Knicks. That's my NBA team. So you were in New York during the time where the Knicks were, constantly in the conference finals, and then obviously the Yankees.
Long time ago.
But winning. So I guess covering sports in those markets during that time. How was that?
That part was great, and that's where the juices were flowing from a local sports standpoint. Because when you're doing local sports and the hometown teams winning championships, there's nothing else like that. Because you're around that team, those players, the coaches, and I'm not saying you're a part of that team, but there's an energy in the community that it's kind of a shared experience. Because you're with these guys when you go to training camp. And, when I was in Dallas, we flew on the Cowboys plane back and forth to games. So you play cards with Emmitt Smith and you do these kinds of things. And so you had relationships that when they won, it felt like you were a part of it, even though you contributed absolutely nothing to it. So I was in Dallas for 92 to 95. So that was Jimmy Johnson's last 2 years, which were both Super Bowls. And then they lost the NFC Championship game that final year, which was Barry Switzer's first year. I go directly to New York. In 95, the Yankees start winning World Series in 96. So they won 4 of the next 6. So I had a stretch of 6 of 8 years where I was with a local team that won it all, either the Super Bowl or the World Series. And that was unbelievable. That was fantastic. Then that kind of stopped happening, and I really got into the play-by-play. And I think those two worlds kind of made me realize again that I love the play-by-play more. But I'm telling you, there's a whole energy and a whole lot of excitement by being around the team that's winning, especially in places like that. Dallas is a football city, and the Cowboys winning is nuts. New York's a baseball town, and the Yankees winning is even nuts. And so, like, you're at the parades and you're doing all these kind of things, and those are things that you can. A lot of people who do that for a living wish they could be around one championship team, and I was blessed and fortunate enough to be around, when you count the years, 6 of them. And I can remember telling George Steinbrenner the first year that they won, and I said, hey, that when I was in Dallas, they won 2 Super Bowls, and I come here, second year I'm here, you win a World Series. I said, maybe I should get a ring. George didn't find that funny, I don't think. But, hey, you shoot your shot, right?
Hey, you got to shoot your shot. Absolutely. So playing on that, right? So you've done UFC, boxing, soccer, NFL, NFL Europe, WNBA, XFL, USFL. And
Major League Baseball.
Major League Baseball. I forgot
Minor League Baseball.
And you talk about like all of those and that love for play-by-play. So is that really what pulled you to do America's Top Dog?
In a way, yes. It's so funny that I am not a big social media guy. I think anyone who checks my social media can figure that out. You can follow me if you want. But, I don't think I've been on Instagram in 2 years, and Twitter's probably been pretty close, unless it's promoting a cause or something that I want to make sure that I try and get the word out and support. But when did I started doing America's Top Dog? I think 4 years ago. The point being that when I was posting frequently on social media. Most of it was me and my dogs. Whether we're out on a hike or just them doing something stupid, or we get back from vacation. You know how like your dog sees you and it's like you've been gone forever, and they come running up to you, like those cute things. So most of my posts were about my two dogs and the people from who were putting together the show. One, I know the executive producer watched our show regularly, and then she saw that I was a dog person, and they wanted someone who could kind of do play-by-play because it was a dog competition. It was American Ninja Warrior with dogs, basically, is probably the way
That's
to put
exactly what I was going to tell our audience, because our audience probably like, what? Yeah, so it's definitely American Ninja Warrior for dogs.
Yeah, 3 seasons on A&E. So they wanted someone who could do live play-by-play. Knowing I was a dog person, having watched our show, and knowing I could do play-by-play, I think it all kind of came together. And I can remember I was in Sri Lanka when I got an email on vacation. So my wife and I were there, and you check your internet. I try not to check it too much on vacation, but every other day maybe or so. And I had an email from my agent, and he was saying, "There's the show, and they're putting together, and they would like to know if you want to host." And I'm like, "Well, what is it? Explain. America's Top Dog. Explain it to me." He sent me what they call a sizzle reel, which is when they show you like the concept of the show. And I saw that, and I go, "This looks pretty cool." Tell them I would be interested, and we negotiated the whole thing while I was on vacation. So I was in Asia because we did Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and Nepal, and so I was halfway around the world and got this deal done. So when I came back, it was like, okay, we start shooting. I can't remember. It was only a couple of weeks after I got back, so I had to kind of figure everything out real quick. But it was fun. It really was.
So I'm very interested in your perspective on the game now, or covering the game now, or just kind of taking us behind the scenes as much as you can. You're like the quarterback, right? And I know you're communicating with everybody off camera, on camera, staying on schedule. Yes. So as the quarterback, is there any struggles that you have one day? Is there segments that you're like, I wish I would have hit that route? You know what I mean? Like, how does that work?
I mean, there's always that. I mean, it's funny because my wife always goes, right after the show, she watches the show, sometimes live, sometimes she records it because she's got things to do on a Sunday. So, but she'll watch it before I get home for sure. Or she'll text me, "Hey, I saw the show. How'd you feel?" And so I always say, "Oh, it was a good show. I like this to this, but there were this moments," and I always do that. And I'm like, she probably doesn't really care. She's asking a question just to be nice. But there's always something. It's like the same thing. If you're an athlete, there's a shot you miss or a foul you made or something you do that it probably didn't matter in the outcome because you won the game by 40 points. But in your head, you're replaying that over and over and over about how could I have done that differently? How could I have done it better? Or sometimes you stumble or say the wrong word. And it's like, it's really not that big a deal. But to me, it is. So there's always that element of it. But it is the big challenge for me. You talk about being a quarterback is, as you said, the contact with everybody in front, behind the camera, behind the scenes. I mean, and so it doesn't just happen on Sunday. My week starts Tuesday, probably on a regular basis. And we try to take Monday off, but I talk to my producer on Mondays usually, and we talk about Sunday, kind of a little bit review, and then kind of start looking forward to. But really, we start hard work on Tuesday, and I am involved and not taking credit for it because there's a lot of people involved. Don't get me wrong, but it's communicated with me. I'll say it that way. Like the features we're going to do, who's going to be on the show. Like when Gronk was on a couple weeks ago, or if Clarissa Thompson is going to go do a feature. The story ideas that we have. If we're going to play a game, what we're going to do. So I'm involved in all of that. And our producer, Bill Richards, and I talk a lot just about ideas. And sometimes it'll be something, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And he throws it out and I go, "Oh, okay." Or I go, "I don't know about that." And he's really great. I'm like, "Okay, if you don't feel it," it's almost like a coach and a quarterback. Because he's like, if you don't feel it, then it's not going to work. So why are we even doing it? Or he may sell me on it. I go, "Okay, I didn't see it that way." But it also goes vice versa. So I think that communication happens, and it's not just with him. He's the main guy, but there's other producers on the show and then the voiceovers that I have to do and other things. So when we get to Sunday, I feel like I've got a grasp on, everything as to like what camera angle they're going to shoot here and what they're going to do there. That's all great until we do the show, because our show is like 70% ad lib. So it could go in any direction. But by knowing everything, it helps me be able to pull it back on the rails and get us going again. I don't know if you saw this past Sunday, Howie had been talking with Sean Payton, who's with us this year, former Saints coach. And Sean, while we're behind the scenes, we're just telling the names of some of the routes they run. And they're like smoke routes, and he's got one.
He got weed heavy real quick.
You saw that, right? And all of a sudden, Howie, who's the biggest square? I mean, he'll tell you. He's the biggest nerd, the biggest square, whatever. And he all of a sudden tries to go doobie and blunt, and we're like, what the heck? Where'd that come from? What are you talking about? So it went off the rails, but in a fun way. We all laugh. We died. We hear more about that part of the show than anything else, and we all love it. So I play with that. And then I think the line was Howie said, "Oh, you guys said I should lighten up," and I said, "Yeah, we said lighten up, not light up."
Not light it up.
But then that allows me to kind of get it back on the rails and get us redirected back to talking football rather than letting it go crazy. But part of that is, and I'm sorry for rambling here, but part of that is kind of a feel on me as well. Like, how long do you let it go? Because that's fun. That's where everybody's having a good time. So you don't want to be the parent and rail it in too much or too soon. So you let it go, but then also you got to kind of feel out, okay, when's enough? Now we've had enough. Let's get it back here. So that's the part of it. But that goes back to kind of having a good handle on everything that's going to happen on the show. And I know, okay, now it's time to get it back here and how to get it back here, because we need to get this in. Or sometimes you go, okay, we can sacrifice this next game because it's not as good as what we're doing right now. So
right, and that has to be so hard. I'm just just because.
Well, that's one of the things you never feel perfect about. Because you go in your head, you're like, oh, did I let that go too long? Or did I let it go long enough? So you go back and forth with that because it's a feel. That's all it is.
And the fact that you guys have been together so long and such a I think what I enjoy most about it and why I believe it's a favorite is because all of you guys are like, coming to like my life and like, so, and even Miles, I mean, MH has this right because of coach, right? Like he was a Dallas Cowboy coach. He was a Miami coach for me. So, and Strahan, like all of the people have like positions in their lives and you guys are such a big family. Like you riff on each other, which is great. Right. Yeah. But you guys point out, you get serious when you need to. That's one of the things we actually posted. We'll probably get to that a little bit, but it's just great to see that, man. So with all the changes, with doing that, we just commend you and I enjoy it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I think part of it is that, I'm sorry. Ahead. No, I think the real reason that it works, and I tell people this all the time, is that we genuinely love one another. And I don't use that word lightly. We don't just show up on Sunday and pretend we're friends. We, during the week, if I showed you our text chain, HR would fire all of us probably, So Jimmy, Terry, and I watch college football every single weekend that Jimmy's out here since he's kind of alternating some of the weeks now.
Right.
But we all watch college football together. We do a boys trip every off season. We go somewhere. This year it was Vegas. The year before they came out here to California. We've done the Keys where Jimmy lives. We've done Montana where Howie lives. But it's just a long weekend that we all get together and it's just us. Yeah, our producer Bill Richards comes as well. But it's just us and we just hang. And
you guys have been in each other's weddings, and
he was best man at my wedding. Michael's wife tried to set me up with her sister once. Like I've known Michael since 1995. I've known Jimmy since 1992. I've known Jay since 1995. And when I say no, I mean like personally no. So those relationships are not just showing up on Sunday and going, okay, let's talk football. We talk on the phone during the week. We text, we do all that kind of stuff. So we really care about one another. And I think that's what comes across. That's what people sense when they see us giving each other a hard time or being serious and having each other's back. When you have a moment like, Terry did this year where he told everybody about his cancer battle. It's like, we've known that for a while, but, we're there with him. And that was another thing that people brought up. They said, we could see that you guys, truly love him. Yeah, of course you do, So I think that whether it's serious or lighthearted, our affection from one another is what comes across on the air, hopefully. And I think that's what people respond to.
That's awesome. And a new studio this year. How you like the new digs?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's the biggest, most technologically advanced studio I've ever been a part of. And my understanding is that's in live television. They use that set or that technology, I should say, for The Mandalorian, which is on the Star Wars show on Apple. That's the only place it's ever been used. So we're the first people ever to use it on a live set. And it took 2 years to get it done. They were able to tear down the old one and build it in this offseason, but from a technology standpoint and to get it all working. And I think it also shows just about how good the people we have are technically behind the scenes. Because knock on wood, we're 6 weeks into it and nothing's gone wrong, at least nothing that people at home will be able to see. And you know how it is. Hell, at home half the time, your Wi-Fi doesn't work right, or your computer screen, something happens And there are, and I'm not joking, thousands of monitors that all have to work in sync, that all have to, be done, and changes that have to happen. And there are computers on the floor. If you watch our show, you can see the football field instead of it being that old AstroTurf like we used to. Now it's all computer screens, so we can do whatever we want. We can put live action behind us. We can do all those kind of things. And we've been able to do it without a glitch, but that's because our technical staff, not only the ones that do it on Sunday, but the ones that built it and made sure everything worked right before we got here. And I know they spent the entire month of August all coming in every single day, working on rehearsal shows to make sure that when we got to September, and when those of us that actually are talent on the show up, that things work. So a lot of people sacrifice a lot of time to make sure it works, and it could not be better.
So Curt, I mean, it's for me, it's you guys with the NFL, and then obviously EJ and all them at Turner Sports with basketball.
And those are my boys.
Yeah,
I text EJ, Barkley. Barkley texts me like on a Sunday. Hey, this segment was hilarious or whatever. I'll go drinking whenever we're in the same place. Have drinks with him. I shouldn't say go drinking because that sounds terrible. But
sounds a little classic. Drinks sound like wine. Yeah,
exactly. It sounds classic. Yeah. So, but like and all those guys, because I look at what they do, they look at what we do, and I think everybody in this business respects one another for sure. But I also think that we kind of do it on a different level. And EJ in particular, the gang he has to corral is about as crazy as the gang I have to corral. So I think we have a little bit of empathy for one another. But I love their show and big fans of them. And they're one of the shows that I don't even watch the game sometime, and I watch them.
Right.
Yes.
And that was kind of like part of my question is like some of the fan base and the people that watch football and people that watch basketball are a lot different now, right? So it's not necessarily just the same route and what this route looks like. There's a lot of other things that they watch the show, maybe not even watch the game. So covering the game for as long as you have, what are some of like the major, obviously we know the major differences with fantasy football and betting and all those type of things, but what are some of the subtle differences that you have seen throughout the course of the game covering it?
I think those are a couple of things you mentioned, but that's caused people to look at it differently because, I've got a friend whose son is 12 or 13, that age, whatever. And he walks around and he has a Patrick Mahomes Kansas City Chiefs jersey on, lives out here in California. And so I go, oh, you're a Chiefs fan. He goes, no, I'm a Mahomes fan. And I think that's how a lot of people watch the game now. They have their favorite players. Sometimes it's because of fantasy football, but sometimes they just go, okay, I like that guy. We grew up rooting for teams. They grew up rooting for individuals. Right. And I think that is one thing that's certainly changed that's different. But from our standpoint, you still cover the teams and stuff, but it does, you highlight, I guess probably a good example would be if we did a feature 12 or 15 years ago, it would probably be on, hey, the Eagles offense is really good, blah, 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 blah. Now it's Jalen Hurts. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's a different perspective, the way you kind of look at it. And I think that's one of the influences that it certainly had. But I always go back to like our show, and I think kind of the same reason that people like the Turner show is that it's more about us and personalities.
Yeah.
No one's ever come up to me and said, you guys did a great job of breaking down the cover 2 last year. No one notices that. It is, Howie was talking about weed and you guys are funny. Like that's what people remember. So I think we've had a little bit more leeway because we were never in that corner where, okay, we're going to break down X's and O's for a solid hour for you. That's never been our show. And so I think that's allowed us to be a little bit more flexible and not have to go, okay, how do we flip the script? Unlike, some other shows that is what they do. And there are people that want that. There's some people that want to wake up and go, I just want to know X and O's. I want to know the betting line. Different strokes for different folks. I always say some people like strawberries, some people like vanilla, man. Everybody doesn't have to like the same thing. And luckily we're in a world where you can get provided with whatever you want.
I like it. MH, ready for those quick hits?
I am. So, Curt, these are kind of some get to know you questions a little bit better. Some things that come to mind kind of first. First time, if ever, that you've been starstruck.
Oh, well, that doesn't count. Like when I was a kid and I ran into a player at the mall. I remember Pepe Frias was a shortstop for the Braves in the early 80s. And he was an all-star shortstop. And I saw him at the mall. And, but I was like, 13 years old, whatever. And I saw him. So I was starstruck by that. So that won't count, but that's the first one that I certainly remember. As far as being an adult, I would say from a sports standpoint, the first one would probably be when I was a local guy in Dallas and was around. It's weird because being around Emmitt Smith and Michael Irvin and Jimmy Johnson was almost routine. But when they played the 49ers in the NFC Championship game that first year, and it was just a locker room interview with a bunch of people around Jerry Rice. That was one of those, holy cow, that's Jerry Rice. You know, I'm standing right here. All I'm doing is holding the microphone, but you're in the same atmosphere. and so that's probably one of the ones that really jumped out at me from that standpoint for sure.
I know you got a lot.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. No, we love it. We love it. I know you have a lot of stamps. So give me your top 3 places to travel, and then the cuisine. I can't even say the word cuisine. There. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give you 3 totally different places because it depends on what I'm looking for. New Zealand is probably my favorite country in the world. I've been there 6 times. I've been to Italy 6 times, New Zealand 6 times, Australia 7 times. But I've been to 92 countries overall. But I would say New Zealand's my favorite country in the world. The Maldives, my favorite place for beach. And then Bhutan was my favorite, like getaway, middle of nowhere, no internet, no nothing. That I did love that. But I will say, can I have a 4th? Because
yes,
we did a safari in Tanzania. And I found not only the safari to be fantastic, the people of Tanzania may be my favorite people in the world. They are the kindest, most gentle, welcoming, friendly people. And it's almost like my wife and I have talked about it. It's almost like they want you to leave there and tell the world how good it is. And they're not doing it because they're acting or they're faking it. That's just who they are. Tanzania would be on that list for sure. But there are a lot of good places, man. There really are. I've been fortunate enough. Out of the 92 countries, there's probably 3 to 4 that I go, I didn't like that.
Okay. Been there, done that.
yeah, exactly. Most of them I really enjoy because I like meeting people. I mean, I think it's one of the things. And again, I'm sorry for making your quick hits, long hits.
No, do your thing, man.
But I went to Antarctica one year, and the way I got there, and I talk about liking people. The year before, I was in Chile, and I was down in Patagonia and down in Tierra del Fuego, which is right at the tip, the southern tip of South America. And I realized this is as close as I'll ever be to Antarctica. And so I'm in a bar. I know, okay, so I talked about drinking. Now I'm talking about being in a bar. You guys are an alcoholic.
That's how you come to Vegas, Curt. We kicking it with you.
We need to know that. Let's add a question to the quiz here.
Okay, there you go.
No. Go ahead.
But I was in a bar, and I speak what I call travel Spanish. You know, I know enough, especially when I get immersed in it for a couple of days. I can speak enough to understand. I'm not saying I'm conjugating verbs correctly and all that stuff, but I can communicate with people. And I was talking to a guy, and I was just saying, is there a way to get over to Antarctica? And he's like, no, because there's no Southwest Airlines that hops you from Chile to Antarctica. But my cousin is a scientist on the Chilean Air Force Base in Antarctica. Here's his email address. He gave me his cousin's email address. I emailed the cousin, and there's no way to just hop over there that year. But he was like, look, if you want to come back next year, they have 3 months, a 3-month window where they can invite people there that are non-Air Force people, non-military people, for a maximum of 3 days. So, and you got to get there on your own plane and all this kind of stuff. But he like, I can help you do this. So if you want to, let me know. And so we worked the process so that the following year, I was able to go and spend 3 days on the Air Force Base in the Chilean Air Force Base in Antarctica. And that was a great trip as well. But that goes back to liking people, man. I like just sitting around and being somewhere, especially a different culture and something you don't know, and finding out about people. Another story, I was in Tonga, and I was there at this, it's called a resort, but I was the only person there. And it was, they brought me a fan at night. And I mean, it was very basic. We'll say it that way. But the guy that took care of me there was, again, sweetest guy, nicest guy. And I was the only person. So, it's basically one of those, what do you want for dinner? I'm like, what do you got? He's like, whatever you want. We'll get it.
Go to the store.
Yeah, exactly. So we did a lot of that. But the point is, after a couple of days I was there, he says, hey, I'm off tomorrow. What are you doing? And well, the same thing I'm doing every day. I'm just sitting here and reading. I mean, that was my getaway, do nothing. And so he goes, well, why don't you come to my house and I'll cook for you? I'm like, okay. So, I mean, it's a small island. So I wound up walking to his house. His wife and mother and like the whole family lives in one place. They kill this pig. He's a small, suckling pig. Cooked it in the ground. Now that took quite a while. But I just sat there and he explained like about his life and what was going on, by his background and his family and the culture and all those kinds of things. And then we just sat on the ground and ate. And it was like, I felt like, Anthony Bourdain or whatever, that kind of thing. But those cultural experiences, again, that's what I try to find when I travel. If you're in Paris, you're going to go to the Louvre. If you're in Rome, you're going to go to the Colosseum. I'm not saying don't do those things because I think we all need to, especially these are things you read about when you're in 8th or 9th grade. So seeing that history and those kinds of things are fabulous. But also try to get something cultural about wherever you go. I talk about the people of Tanzania. We did the same thing in Mozambique. Wherever we've gone in the world, my wife and I now, but even before when it was just me, or I travel with buddies sometimes, but a lot of times solo, I try to get off the beaten path, if you will, and meet some people. And sometimes those are workers at a bar or a restaurant, whatever, but they're going to tell you where to go and what to do. But a lot of times you'll wind up saying, hey, like this guy, I'm off tomorrow. Why don't we hang together and I'll show you around town and I can show you our culture and these kinds of things. And so you get much better food. I can tell you that for sure.
Right.
You really do, no matter where you are. Less expensive and much better food. But you really get to see how people live in other places rather than just kind of seeing what the country wants to show you from a cultural standpoint because they want in the guidebook or to get tourists there. And the one bottom line I think that you learn is wherever people are, everybody's just trying to do the best they can for themselves and their family. And that is the common denominator. People always, well, what do you learn about? I go, that's what you learn wherever you go. And they may do it, they may not. Some of the greatest people in the world or some of the great relationships or people that don't have what we would consider, they're not trying to keep up with the Joneses with a new car or the next TV or the next phone or whatever. They're enjoying the families and the relationships and the neighborhoods and the things that they do culturally. And being exposed to that kind of at least helps me kind of reset. So that's the reason I love travel. So
Love
another
that.
non-quick answer. Man, I'm gonna kill you. Sorry.
No, you're good.
You're gonna kill me.
No. I only got one more for you. Just a book that you would recommend. And I know there's some books that we're going to get to, but a book that you're reading.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you one of the books that I've read probably in the last year that I found really good was called From Generosity to Justice. And it's written by, and I can't believe I just drew a blank on his name. I know the guy. He's the head of the Ford Foundation, which is the largest philanthropic foundation in America. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank. I apologize. But it's called From Generosity to Justice. And his point is he's a black gay man in his 60s who grew up in Mississippi and grew up to run the largest philanthropic foundation in America. But his point is that we have to do more than make donations and say we're helping people out. We have to make sure that justice is involved, that equity is involved. Donating to a school and making sure the kids actually get an education are two totally different things. And those kind of things. So I think that's one book that I would certainly recommend to everybody. And I apologize that I totally forgot his name right now.
No worries. All right. So definitely want to jump into the winner circle, man. This is just amazing. And I think this is kind of part of we'll let you explain that. But I think one of the things we talk about is we push education. We push that's why, MH asked like, what's a book you're reading? But and let's clap it up for you, man. You just recently graduated, man. Let's go.
Thank you.
So you got your, public
Masters in Public Policy and Administration
at Northwestern, correct?
Yes, sir.
Please share with us, because of course we read your bio before, but please share with our audience what made you go into that. Please explain the background by minorities and the social injustice. Like, how did that kind of all come together for you?
Okay, well, if you go back to the background, when I first went to college, I was a political science major as a freshman. Now I wound up changing just for a lot of people go their freshman year and a semester and decide they want to be something different. But I've always had an interest in politics and policy. But then I got a sports track and this business. And so I really didn't go back to that other than just having an interest in it personally. But after the events of 2020, and particularly the killing of George Floyd, I think like so many people, I was trying to, figure out how do I make a difference? What can I do? And I felt then, and certainly feel now, that I've been blessed to have a platform. And not saying that people do what I want them to do or whatever, but I've got a voice that I can use. So how do I best use that voice to activate change? And for me, it has to be more than a hashtag or than going on Instagram and complaining about somebody and saying they did them wrong. You have leaders. And when I say leaders, some of them are politicians, some of them are CEOs in the corporate world, but you have people that can actually make change. The question is, how do you get them to do it? With that and the platform and access that I have, I thought, okay, I need to find out what they need. Rather than going into a politician's office or CEO's office and say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you did this? I need to be able to say, okay, I understand that in order to get this end goal, you need this first step. Here's how you can get that first step. Or here are the avenues that we can take. So find out what they need so that you can provide them the information to help them get you down to where you want them to get in the end. And so going back and studying public policy seemed natural to me because it does affect both the corporate and political world. And so then, I started just kind of researching. I mean, I'm out here in Southern California, and USC has one of the top public policy programs. And I was torn between public policy and administration. But then I saw Northwestern has the #1 ranked public policy program and a top 5 public administration. And they also have a combined master's program where you can do both. So that became the easy answer for me, at least. And then it was just weird because here I am. At that time, I was 55 years old, and I'm filling out college applications. And you're trying to get your grade point average from college and your transcripts, and you're writing an essay and all. And you're like, God, I thought I was done with this. And then you're sitting back with your fingers crossed, waiting for that letter. Oh, did I get in? Did I get in? Did I get in? So that was kind of wild. And then once I got in, it was a no-brainer for me because that I knew what I wanted to do and I knew where I wanted to go. So it was just a matter of carving out the time for it. And I just put my head down and kept going forward. And I think right now I just completed the degree at the end of August, right before Labor Day. And so it's a matter of figuring out exactly how I want to use it. And I don't think there's one way. There's not, okay, I'm going to do this and that's going to be the path for the rest of my life. I think use it here, maybe in some corporate setting. I can use it here in some, NGO setting or some foundational setting. I can use it here maybe in a political setting. And one of the things that I did even before I graduated was the last week of July, I went to Washington, D.C., and I met with 13 members of Congress, 7 representatives and 6 senators. And I think the split was kind of the same, 7 Democrats, 6 Republicans. Because I wanted to meet people from both parties. And I wanted to meet people that I considered either moderate or pragmatic, not crazy people on either extreme, to just kind of discuss more of an introduction than anything else, but also to kind of pick their brain and say, okay, look, are some of these things that we all want to achieve actually achievable? Because Washington looks like a mess right now, at least from an outside standpoint. So I wanted to kind of dig in and find out. Some of what I found out made me more hopeful. Some of it made me less hopeful. But it goes back to kind of what I was talking about. I have that access. Again, not patting myself on the back or saying that I'm anything special, but I do Fox NFL Sunday. So when I reach out, I'm able to get 13 members of Congress to meet with me over a 3-day stretch. Some of them went to dinner with me, lunch with me. I mean, so it wasn't just, okay, come in the office, shake my hand, and I'll pretend I met with you. Right. So I'm able to do that. As an average citizen, you have a hard enough time getting your own congressperson to meet with you. Forget 13 of them. So that goes back to what I was saying. If I had this access, that I can get people to sit down with me, let me find a way to use it for good rather than just saying, oh, wow, I got a chance to meet with them and we took pictures and that's it.
There's a lot of deep stuff that we can get into that from there. I mean, what I've learned in this short time talking to you is just about you always learning and how much people and relationships mean to you.
Yeah.
I mean, without getting too big picture, like did that start back at home or how's that just?
No, that's a good question. I was the shyest kid until I was about 15. Like I told you I played sports and stuff, but I was like the quiet kid of the sports team in the neighborhood. I would just play, but I was always really quiet until I was about 15. And as usual, it was a girl. And I was like, well, I want to get this. I better start talking.
Little mouth don't get fed.
Exactly. So that kind of changed. And for whatever reason, I kind of opened up from that standpoint. But no, I've never. Being shy, you were not in a hurry to meet people and that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But it changed. But I also go back to I started traveling in '94, so I was 28 years old then when I took I'd been to Mexico or whatever, but like big international trip. And by doing that, that made me want to explore more because I did want to get off the beaten path and see things that weren't necessarily in a guidebook or that you're only hear about or only the things that you hear about. And by doing that, I think it kind of reinforced it. That oh wow, there's some cool crap out here that you don't know. Or by meeting people one on one, it's more than what you hear about. And so by doing it once, then you want to do it again. You do it again. You want to do it again. And I think that really opened up that door.
So in media, right? Or new
Mhm.
media, however you want to, because we are considered new media.
Mhm.
What is
Oh, I think I'm definitely old media for sure. Sunday morning, hour on TV, a little football all day. It doesn't get much more old school than that.
What do you think is the responsibility? Because you talk about a platform, what do you
Mhm.
think is the responsibility of the media to talk about some of these things, right? Because you hear that, like our
Mhm.
opening talks about, shut up and dribble.
Mhm.
Even one of the things we just posted on our social media, I know you're not on there a lot, but what we posted on our social media was a kind of, a back and forth that you guys had when bringing up the topic that we talk about a lot on our show is the presence of Black coaches.
Mhm. Mhm.
And your team everybody was putting in great commentary, right? Like Jimmy was talking about we need more GMs and we need more it was just kind of going down that line.
Right.
And it was great to have that conversation and to hear that from them. But you
Mhm.
said it doesn't take we don't need Black people to hire Black people. And
Yeah.
the way you did
It shouldn't take Black people to hire Black people. Yeah.
well, hold on, let's talk about how cold it was when you did it. Like it was
Yeah.
almost like a walk-off though when you hit it.
Well, no, it wasn't meant that way. I go back to it was genuine. That's why. But also because of the relationships we all have, nobody took it personally. I mean, first of all, I think they all agreed. I just said it a different way, but it wasn't like in some cases you're like, oh, they're pissed at Curt or Jimmy and Curt don't like each other. It was not any of that. And I think we're able to do that on our show. You talk about the responsibility, and I think that kind of is a good example of it, is that I think we have a responsibility to use the platforms that we have for the benefit of others, meaning besides the people that are in whatever room you're in. You can't just all collect a paycheck and then go, okay, I'm good. But you also should only do what you're comfortable with. I think, like if you're not comfortable speaking out about these issues, then you shouldn't. You shouldn't be forced to. Some jobs require you to do it. So you're like, okay, this is part of the job, so you need to. But if that's not who you are, if you're a professional athlete or you're a media person, you go, I just want to give scores and I don't want to talk about anything else, then I think you have the right to do it. Now it's up to other people to decide whether or not you may have that job. And I'm not talking about cancel culture, or whatever. It's just like some jobs require you to do certain things. But yeah, I think the worst thing you can do is pretend you care about something, get on a soapbox and be full of crap. To me, that's more offensive than not saying anything.
And dangerous. That could go in a whole, that could go in a whole other.
Yep. No, you're right.
All right. Well, hey, so kind of wrapping it up, and hopefully we can grab your ear a couple minutes after the show. But what we want to kind of do is this is the part where we call the assist, right? So this is where you kind of put your coaching hat on, or you kind of give that the assist to our listeners, man. So if there's a word you live by, or a quote, or just kind of what you would tell your younger self, go.
I think the whole thing is it's kind of a little bit what we were just talking about. Make whatever you do about more than you. And it doesn't mean that you can't satisfy your desire to have a job. I love doing what I do. And so by doing it, that makes me happy. I love collecting a paycheck. So by doing that, that makes me happy. So I'm not saying you can't serve yourself, but don't let that be the end game. Let whatever you do be about more than you. As I use this example, I go, okay, I've got a platform. Let me use that for the greater good. Let me find a way to use that for the greater good. And I've got a foundation that I'm part of, Us United. I'm one of the founding members of, and like one of the things we talk about is unity and bringing people together. And it kind of started the same thing out of the George Floyd protest. And part of it began by trying to bring together police departments or local law enforcement and members of the Black community, in all honesty, in different areas of the country. And we started there, and it's kind of expanded into some other things just because the world's freaking nuts right now. But that's just another example for me. It's like find whatever it is that drives you, that makes you happy, but that serves other people.
Is Usher United going to be your calls for cleats this year? I know you kind of
it was last year.
Yeah, it was last year. You're going to do it again because like that's a great initiative, and like so many things that you do, man. We didn't get into the book, which I've read, and
that's because I rambled too long. That's my fault. Sorry.
Not at all, man. We enjoy these conversations, and that's what it's meant to be. So I hope the listeners do too. MH, man, final thoughts.
No, just humble by you being on with us, man, and very appreciative. So we'll be watching on Sunday for sure.
I appreciate it. I thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. No, we've enjoyed it, man. So we got to thank a couple people. So obviously, Howie Long Jr., man, much love. I appreciate you, brother. And then, your management, Derek, man. Derek helped us kind of get everything. So Derek, thank you for your time and coordination to get everything. And finally, man, we want to thank you, the people, for listening, man. I hope you've enjoyed this show as much as we did. And that's what it's about, conversations, man. And thank you once again, Curt, for jumping on and spending the time with us as a busy man, especially during season and all the other great things that you have going on. So please, we drop a new show every Thursday, so please subscribe to YouTube as well as wherever you listen to podcasts, because visual representation matters. And like we always say, please stay safe, practice gratitude, and know we're rooting for you.
Screaming, all us blacks got is sports and entertainment until we even.
Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Look. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Spent about 2 racks on handmade new rags. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. That's everybody from sports to college class to rap and back.